Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Warren from Pattern Journal, and today we're going to be looking at Spear of the Emperor by Aaron Dembski-Bowden. Now, this is a Warhammer 40,000 novel set during the era Indomitus, and it was published in 2018. Now, speaking of the era Indomitus, in case some of you are not familiar with that, this was the huge push during the end of 7th edition and beginning of 8th edition by Games Workshop to advance narrative of Warhammer 40,000 and moving past the age-old stuck timeline of 999.m41, which is when the 13th Black Crusade was happening, and we were just like stuck at 10 minutes to midnight for the setting for like so many years, for almost like 2 decades. And we advanced the plot, we moved into a new millennium, and suddenly there's so many things happening. We have returning Primarchs in the form of Mortarion, Magnus, Gilliman himself, ascendant heroes and villains like Marneus Calgar, Abaddon, so many more, and new heroes, new villains are coming back. And what Aaron does in this novel is he gives us a snapshot in microcosm of the larger conflict that's going on. Our star character here is Lieutenant Commander Amadeus Caius Incarius of the Mentors Legion. He's a senior officer of the chapter, and he's been sent by his chapter master on a mission to evaluate the loyalties and the disposition of the Emperor Spears and the Celestial Alliance, the two chapters who form a brotherhood that guards the Lara's Vale subsector. Now, just to start off, Aaron kicks us off with a prologue by our narrator, who is a human servant of Amadeus. Her name is Anuradha, and it's a very interesting style of writing in that short prologue, which it's so fanciful, and it's like you're not reading a Warhammer 40,000 novel, but you're reading maybe something fantastical. And I'm reminded of the juxtaposition that William King did with his Space Wolves novels back in the day. Because what happened with those novels was that the prologue and the epilogue for those novels were always our hero Ragnar Blackmane in the present as a Wolf Lord, but the stories focused on how he became a recruit of the Space Wolves chapter and how he progressed from not just becoming a Blood Claw, but to becoming eventually something more than that. He became a captain in his own right, and we never actually got his full story before William King left the series and others took up the mantle. But it was always interesting to see, how we have the contrast of the past and the present in those novels, and I saw pretty much all of that here as well. Although it's not something to that an extreme of a time frame. But however, still, it was a brilliant prologue, although it was kind of heavy with name drops and references and stuff that, it's always overwhelming. But thankfully, it was a short prologue, and then we just kick straight into the narrative. And man, it was a brilliant start to the novel. We have Amadeus' ship crossing the warp, and there's an accident on board, and they lose a lot of crew, and there's concerns about demonic incursions and all that stuff. And he's Aaron sets up the atmosphere so fast, and it's like you're really down in the action from the first few pages, and then it like slows down a little bit as we start to learn more about our narrator, and also we learn more about our primary character Amadeus himself. And we start to learn more about what the mission is specifically, what his role is going to be, and we meet up with the Emperor Spears Marines, and so on and so forth, as we meet our villains as well, who are the Exilarchy. It's such a fanciful name in the way that only Warhammer 40,000 does, which is like and then it's like it sets up the stage for you're really reading something that feels so true to the core of Warhammer 40,000 for the, like, I don't know, the last like 25 years or more. And what I found throughout the novel was that Anuradha was a great narrator, and her journey as she progresses from being not just a servant of the chapter of the mentors, but how she grows up to be a lot more than that, not just as an aid to Amadeus, but also in some ways his confidant. And more on that towards the end of the novel, which I don't want to spoil or anything. But one of the really key things about the novel as well was that it contrasts the firstborn Marines like Amadeus against some of the other firstborns he meets, like Lord Break of the Third Company of the Emperor Spears, and he meets some Primaris Marines. He meets Celestial Lions, and there's a lot of culture clash that's going on in the novel because Amadeus himself, as someone coming from the mentors, he has to fight the not only the more barbaric Emperor Spears, and you know that's the fight that goes on because his is a more reserved chapter, more conservative, but the Emperor Spears are more pragmatic. They're more emotional in some ways, even, and there's a contrast of that going on. But also, huge point here because the mentors they bear the chapter designation and the chapter colors of the Star Scorpions, who were part of the three chapters that are set up to guard the Ilara's Vale subsector, the Adeptus Villari. So you have the Emperor Spears, the Celestial Lions, and the Star Scorpions. But of course, the Scorpions they went extinct. They all died out, and for whatever reason, the Inquisition saw fit to, you know, rebirth that chapter with a new name, with the same heraldry and everything, and call them the Mentors Legion. So there's so much going on in Amadeus's interactions with the Emperor Spears, and you know what I really enjoyed in that aspect was learning so much more about all these chapters, but not just the Mentors, but the Emperor Spears and also Celestial Lions, and even the little bits that we get of Star Scorpions, which is something I always look forward to in a 40k novel when it has Marines in it, and it is something I really love about the Blood Angels books, the Ultramarines books, the Soul Drinkers books, and the Space Wolves are their force. You have the Grey Knights novels by Ben Counter, and also just so much more. The chapter cultures, the chapter traditions, what their histories are like. That's always something that I really enjoy reading about. And Aaron, just he's just full throttle with all of that. We learn so much about the Emperor Spears, their home world, their culture, their traditions, and how they operate, how they treat people, how they are treated by their own home world's populations. Because a lot of chapters, they it's a varying spectrum. Some chapters, like the Ultramarines, they enjoy a very close relationship with their with the regular humans of their home worlds, but some, like the Space Wolves, they're seen as mystical figures, and they're seen as some of these distant warriors who only exist in myths and legends, and they'll come down once a generation or once every 2 or 3 generations. They'll come down, they'll take some recruits with them, and then that's all you'll ever know. And but here it's something that's like it's a mix of those two approaches, but it's also unique in its own way. And learning what that is was, I think, it even came as a bit of a shock to me as a reader because it's just not something that you expect to see. And of course, there's so much more about the genetic heritages of the mentors of the Emperor Spears and so on. So in terms of detail to the chapters and the characters, but also their fighting styles and everything. This book has a whole lot of that, and I think it in the years to come, like it's already been 5 years since this novel came out, but I think even for a much longer time than this, like the next 10 years, the next 15 years, I think this is going to be a very important novel to understand what happens when two Space Marine chapters they meet and there's a huge clash on so many different levels. Because on one hand you have these conservative, reserved mentors, and then you have these boisterous and barbaric Emperor Spears. So you can see elements of so many different things. Like here's a little bit of Ultramarines, here's a little bit of Space Wolves, and you can see how Aaron gives his own take on everything. So it's like it only adds to the setting rather than take anything from it. And of course, you know, everything is informed by that killer artwork by Mark Lee that you see on the screen there. And of course, with given that this is written by Aaron and he has such a stature in the writing ranks of the Black Library authors, he also got a special limited edition release of the novel that included so many different knickknacks, so much cool stuff, and it shows, this is something that I would like to see more of. I don't know if they've done it in recent years after this novel, but something like this is, I think, indicative of the kind of push they want to give. And it's a little sad that we haven't gotten more Emperor Spears because there's a wealth of story still to be told about them, about Brayok and Amadeus and Anuradha, and the entire narrative that is going on within the Alara's Veil at this time, at this point in time, and all given all the prologues and the, sorry, not all the prologues, all the all the all the more present stuff that is there at the beginning of every chapter or so, as Anuradha narrates, what's going on and what this mysterious warrior is asking of her. And I thought that it was a pretty damn good novel. Like the action is really good. It's not your typical bolter porn, but there's so much more nuance to that. And again, there's this culture clash between how the mentors operate and how the Emperor Spears operate, and that's on like a more meta level, but also more on a specific level with how Amadeus fights because he has his helots. So that's Anuradha and her two compatriots, how they assist him versus how the Emperor Spears fight, which is on a more traditional level, fighting, by squad, fighting by squads or even by company sizes. So there's all that stuff. But one of the other things that I found really interesting was that there's this deep, compelling mystery about the star scorpions. Because, at the start we know that they went extinct, but what happened with that? And what was the result of them going extinct? How the Imperium was involved? What the Imperium did or didn't do to save them? And what the Emperor Spears feel about that? What Amadeus feels about that? All of that, because this is he's being sledgehammered at every turn by the Emperor Spears, who they detest what he represents, because he's coming to them not as a Star Scorpion, he's coming to them as a mentor's legionnaire, and they hate that because they have this centuries, millennia old brotherhood with the Star Scorpions, and this is like spitting in their face. And then we also get so much with the Celestial Lions, and that has always been something very fascinating for me because the Celestial Lions have such a tragic history, you could say, because during the Third War for Armageddon, they were almost wiped out. They took a stand against the Inquisition and they were punished heavily for it, quote unquote. And, there's some undercurrents of that, but you see that, this is about how they resurrect themselves. And we get to see some really great examples of brotherhood between the Space Marine chapters, which is another thing that I really value in a Space Marine novel. because I want to see how they interact with other chapters. And of course, some of the most some of the really good stuff related to that is like with the first novel that Graham McNeil wrote for the Ultramarines. I forget the name of it. Warriors of Ultramar, it might have been. And we see the culture clash between the Ultramarines and one of the successive chapters, the Mortifactors, and how they're like so drifted apart from their inception so much. And it's like it's a bigger shock to the Ultramarines to see what the Mortifactors have become than it is for Amadeus to see what the Emperor Spears are. So, anyways, a lot of really good characterization from Aaron, not just for the Marines, but for their human supporting characters, and also for the villains, because we do get a lot of scenes with our villains, specifically their leaders, and it's like this is so much good stuff. It's the kind of writing that makes you want to read more about the backstory of all these characters, about what's been happening for so many years. And that's where I think, the good writers, that's where they all excel at. They give you reasons to keep reading, to delve more into the backstory, to want to know more. And, then they deliver on it in successive books. And like I said, it's kind of sad that we haven't gotten a book 2 yet, but hopefully someday, hopefully soon, we'll get that, because I really want to read more about Amadeus. I want to read more about Anuradha's last days. I want to read more about Brayok himself and other characters that we see in the novel, and how their fates end up, by the end, because there's such a huge gap that the novel has to cover within its narrative, and we just can't cover everything. So more short stories, more, maybe even a novella to the novel, where you want to take it. So, anyways, guys, that's some of my thoughts on Spear of the Emperor. One thing I will say is the novel is a little bit slow to take off. Like, it has a great prologue, it has a great opening chapter, but at some points it really drags down, and the flow is very slow. And that was when I was like, I'll put the book down, I'll come back to it later. And I was reading an ebook on a tablet, so it was easier to put down, because eye strain and everything, I struggle with that at times. So that was a bit of a stumbling block at times. But in the second half, your patience is rewarded, and action picks up significantly. And then it's like, it's a rolling ball. It just doesn't stop. And you're just along for the ride, and you got to keep going with it. So overall, I think this was a fairly good novel, and like I said, it makes me want to read more about these characters, and the future and the past of these characters as well. And I think there's some really good opportunities for where the story could go next, and we get a huge teaser of that in we get a huge teaser of that at the end with the epilogue. And there's this really cool reveal about one of the characters that Radha talks about a lot in her ruminations, whatever you want to call it, the sections that are set in the present timeline rather than being the flashbacks that the most of the story is. And I thought that was really neat. And it was like, man, I totally did not expect that. So kudos to Aaron on writing a hook like that. So, anyways, that's Spear of the Emperor for you guys. Highly recommended. I want to know more. Hopefully, we'll get it someday. And I got some more stuff coming down the line. Some more Primaris novels. And so just stay tuned for that. You can find my social media listed at the top. And thanks for sticking on with the video. And we'll be back soon. Cheers, guys. Bye. See ya.